And welcome to this late night edition of the Moriah Nightly News due to these Monday night engagements, but still better than late night television. From the nation to Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. The Wall Street Journal had an article last week discussing what was referred to as technology's role on the battlefield in the 21st century, and how the proliferation of technology and new technology had changed the face of warfare in places like Ukraine. And not only how that had influenced the inability for Russia to just steamroll Ukraine in a matter of weeks, but also noting how at that time, at least, it had prevented the U.S. from achieving the goal of regime change and certainly the decisive victory that had been hoped for earlier on there. With that, it also noted that it would likely influence China's decision to go into Taiwan, particularly with the rise of drone warfare and those usages there that make it a problem for larger militaries like the US and other major powers to be able to inflict heavy damages on what it called the smaller or intermediate nations like Iran. Now, I do also think it could have given more of an emphasis to the Iranian strategy of simply waiting out the Americans, as that was likely part of the end game there. But nevertheless, an important article for our top story tonight, with the news coming over the weekend that there had been a peace deal reached, or a settlement agreement, whatever you would want to call it, that was announced all over the media, that the president had gotten the agreement that he wanted and hoped Iran, and that Iran had actually confirmed had happened. There had been speculation for at least a week that Iran had not gotten the deal, but nevertheless they did confirm it, at least according to what the Wall Street Journal told us. And they have, neither side, however, has released what the text of that agreement is. So far, from what we can tell, it is a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, or uncertainty, as I had called it earlier on in my reporting, that would lay out a 60-day framework for more permanent negotiations. So this will drag out for a number of weeks regardless. And however this plays out, and it is supposed to be, there is reportedly some type of signing that will take place on Friday that the vice president said this would immediately open the Strait of Hormuz, and gas prices had begun to take a downward dip, at least here locally. That was here in town from what I had seen at Stewart's, though I had not seen it elsewhere, so I'm not sure how widespread that was. There was confusion with how Israel would play into the agreement because Iran had said that Lebanon was included. The conflict in Lebanon was to be included in the agreement. The U.S. noted, however, that the conflict in Lebanon was not a part of that arrangement. Israel is concerned that Trump's deal would give enough economic relief to Iran to start rebuilding the economy, and the rebuilding of that economy would translate immediately over to building weapons again, Because remember, I had stated on Friday's broadcast that they had been battered but not defeated, and so how quickly they could rebuild might depend on how much money they get from the arrangement. And for Netanyahu, he remains under attack or criticism, if you will, from those of his own people for his mishandling of both the war and his mishandling of his relationship with the United States. Again, another piece of information that would fly in the face of the criticisms from the American side saying that Netanyahu was just Trump's, or that Trump was a puppet of Netanyahu, all a bunch of anti Semitic rhetoric, as far as I'm concerned, that had no basis in reality. Here on the local front, the Ticonderoga storage unit, which we had reported on Friday after the town board meeting and the testimony that took place there, because there was a great deal of testimony. However, over the weekend, the Times of Ty noted an article, that they reported, due to what was announced at the meeting as a task force, which was my language for it. It was not their language, but which is basically a research team that would more or less is designed to research all aspects of battery energy storage systems, to study, as it was put in the article through Jim O'Brien, a quote, to study the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not that there could be a good, and saying that the community will decide the future of BESS in Ticonderoga after the study is complete. The panel will include about 5 different aspects: fire and hazardous material as one, sciences, medical, government, and so I think that's 4. But you get the picture there. My notes were not legible enough for me to see that. I apologize for that. But so on the fire and hazardous material side, you have Jason Parent, Joe Norton, Mike LaValle, and Jim O'Brien serving as that. Remember, Mr. O'Brien himself had 37 years as a hazmat coordinator for Essex County and International Paper. The sciences were Jeremy Torino and Ray Francis, both of whom are either chemistry or biology teachers at Ticonderoga High School, was what Mr. O'Brien reported at the meeting on Thursday. The medical was Laura Best, who is also on the town council, or a matter of public record and transparency there for those who don't know, and Dr. Glenn Chapman, also serving as the medical team. The government looks to be Doug McTyler, Mike, I cannot read that. That's what I get for scribbling this. And Tom Jebs, I think that's Powers, Mike Powers. In any case, if I did not read that properly, it is on the Sun's website for those who want the information. And I give that here to speak and for the accuracy of that information and what that is. One of the more, or most, if not the most noteworthy part of that article was that there is a bill in committee down in Albany to extend ORES jurisdiction, that's the Office of Renewable Energy Siting jurisdiction, to include the types of storage projects that are being considered for Ticonderoga. and that it would be Senate bill, and they listed it in the article, S5506 and Assembly Bill A8378, that would give ORES the jurisdiction to include those types of standalone projects because they don't meet the current ORES criteria. So there is no direct ORES involvement right now, but if this bill were to go through, they could step in and steamroll or override any local pushback that is being presented right now. And that, I believe, it could very well play into why the town of Ticonderoga is putting up this panel of experts to study all of this BESS at length. I cannot prove that theory, so that is just one thought that I have had on my own level of thinking about this. That if and that nugget from the Times of Thai seems to confirm my suspicion that the state could get involved, and that there could be very much a constitutional crisis if the state is going to override its authority or overstep its authority and tell local governments what to do. That's very much a concern for individual rights here in the United States. That, of course, is nothing new because New York State has been doing this for a long time, and those of us with our eyes open have known that for years. But in any case, that is where that stands, and I, for one, do believe they do not know what they're up against with the people of the North Country, and they will soon find out. There are also tonight in the town of Moriah was a story that was sent in by an anonymous tip, but a source in the Adirondack, it was an Adirondack magazine, I did not write down, but noting that the Moriah Whistle Pig Company was up for sale, or has been up for sale, for about $17 million to Zags 26 LLC. I do apologize. That's what happens when you scribble quickly to come on the air, being late as I was, that you don't write down. I forgot to write down that, but it is, you can search it on Google and find the article, because I did afterwards. It's unclear. So this was a $17 million sale that's being reported here from Moriah, the Moriah Whistle Pig to this company, Zags 26 LLC. It's unclear, as they called it was the language they used, if the Vermont-based distillery will continue to operate here, because it did note that they had just renewed their liquor license to 2029. So even with that sale, it is, again, still not clear what they will do with that. So again, that was for $17 million to Zags 26 LLC, and it noted that Moriah Town Supervisor Matt Brassard was not aware that there had been a sale. Very much true. They are usually public record, and a lot of the times, if you look in the back of your newspaper, you will find them. But if you're like me, you don't look back there too often. And so it's very much possible that that was not on his radar. So, in any case, we will certainly do our best here to follow up on that, with things not being clear. And the article did note that they, for example, could not get comment from Moriah Ventures, which was the subsidiary of that company that handles the business side for WhistlePig. They did not get comment. That's very common. By the way, we still have not ourselves had comment from the Adirondack Park Agency on the renewable energy projects, which to me tells you a lot about the agenda there. If they had nothing to hide, they'd have no problem giving comment. So that will be certainly followed up on, and as well as a couple of other stories following up in the area that were reported over the weekend that we did not want to include for tonight's broadcast. So that will be coming down the line, and noteworthy, if my math is correct, I found out this week that Moriah's town board meeting will be held this Thursday as the third Thursday of the month. So assuming my math is correct, this would be the third Thursday in June, and therefore that would be the date for it. I will have to confirm that and post that accordingly. And so that will do it for us here on a somewhat slow news day, at least here in the region. And so a thank you to those who have anonymously underwritten this episode. I do not want to mention them by name, so I did not cover that in the agreement. But a thank you to those who have supported us financially. So that is the Moriah Nightly News on this Monday evening to start off this week in June, the middle of June. Have a good evening and good night.